Homeless boy rescues a lost toddler on Thanksgiving Eve and decides to find his family. But what the boy discovers leaves him in tears. The icy November wind clawed at Ryan's face as he huddled deeper into his tattered hoodie. 16 years old and already a veteran of Chicago streets, he had learned to blend into the shadows. Tonight, the city was alive with anticipation. Families carrying bags of groceries, laughter spilling out of doorways, and windows glowing with warm, golden light. Thanksgiving Eve had turned the downtown streets into a bustling carnival of activity. People hurried past Ryan, their arms laden with golden turkeys, freshly baked pies, and bundles of sage and rosemary. The smells followed them, trailing like ghosts of kitchens filled with love. Turkey roasting, bread baking, cinnamon simmering. It was intoxicating, almost cruel. It reminded Ryan of a world he used to be a part of. Across the street, a family struggled with their shopping. A little boy clutched his mother's hand as his father carried a mountain of bags. The boys' laughter rang out as they all tried to balance the load, their faces pink from the cold but full of joy. Ryan lingered, watching them for a moment too long. His stomach growled, but he clenched his jaw and turned away. There was no point in torturing himself. The last Thanksgiving he could remember had been 3 years ago, before everything had fallen apart. The smell of his mom's pecan pie cooling on the counter, the way she sang softly as she set the table. Those memories were as warm as they were distant. The fire that had taken his home and his parents had extinguished more than just a roof over his head. It had stolen his place in the world. Ryan shoved his hands into his pockets and trudged toward Grant Park. The park had become a sort of refuge over the past year, a place where he could disappear. But tonight, even the park felt alive. Strings of golden lights decorated the trees, their glow cutting through the darkness. Couples strolled along the paths, some holding hands, others clutching steaming cups of coffee. The biting wind picked up, forcing Ryan to wrap his hoodie tighter around himself. It wasn't much against the cold, but it was all he had. His sneakers, worn and frayed at the edges, crunched over frost-covered leaves as he made his way toward a bench near the fountain. The benches were his usual resting spot when he had nowhere else to go. The fountain, now turned off for the winter, seemed lonely under the glow of a nearby street lamp. As he sat, he caught sight of his reflection in the dark glass of a nearby storefront. His hollow cheeks and sunken eyes stared back at him, a reminder of the countless nights spent sleeping rough, the meals missed, the hope lost. For a moment he looked away, unable to face himself. The world around him seemed to hum with energy. A group of carolers nearby rehearsed under a streetlight, their voices soft but cheerful. Silent night carried through the crisp air, a melody of warmth and serenity. Ryan found himself closing his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He didn't believe in miracles anymore, but the song stirred something inside him, a faint longing for comfort, for belonging. "Hey, kid!" A gruff voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Ryan turned quickly, his muscles tense. A street vendor stood a few feet away, his tray of roasted peanuts steaming in the cold air. The man studied Ryan for a moment before tossing a small bag of peanuts his way. "On the house," the vendor said, already walking away. "Looks like you need it more than I do." Ryan stared at the warm bag in his hands, the faint aroma of roasted nuts wafting up. "Thanks," he mumbled. But the vendor was already disappearing into the crowd. For a moment, Ryan held the bag close to his chest, letting the heat seep into his frozen fingers. It wasn't much, but it was something. A chill gust of wind swept through the park, rattling the branches of the trees and sending a shiver through Ryan's thin frame. He leaned back on the bench, his gaze lifting to the sky. The stars were faint, washed out by the city's lights, but they were there, tiny, distant, and unreachable. They reminded him of the life he once had, a life that now felt as far away as those stars. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, bringing with it the same challenges and uncertainties. But for tonight, Ryan allowed himself a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, this Thanksgiving would bring something different. Something more than the cold bench and the ache of hunger. And so he sat, cradling the bag of peanuts, as the city carried on around him. Its laughter, music, and celebration drifting through the air like a bittersweet melody. Ryan woke the next morning, his back stiff from the unforgiving bench. The city had quieted in the early hours, but a light blanket of frost coated the grass and glistened on the park's empty benches. He flexed his fingers to bring some warmth back to them, his breath clouding the air as he exhaled. The peanuts from the night before sat untouched in his pocket. He had clung to them more for comfort than sustenance, unwilling to let go of the tiny kindness that had reminded him he wasn't completely invisible. As the sun rose higher, warming the park slightly, Ryan stood and started walking, unsure of his next destination. The familiar pull of hunger gnawed at him, but the city had taught him to ignore it. He wandered past the playground at the park center, where empty swings swayed gently in the cold wind. A faint sound stopped him in his tracks. At first, he thought it was just the creaking of the swings, but then he heard it again. A soft, muffled sob. Ryan hesitated. He had trained himself to stay out of other people's business. Survival on the streets meant avoiding unnecessary trouble. But something about the cry drew him in. It wasn't the angry shouts of an argument or the irritated whines of a lost tourist. It was fragile, scared, like a wounded bird. He followed the sound, weaving through the empty play structures until he spotted a small figure curled up by the base of the slide. It was a little girl, no older than 6 or 7, trembling in the cold. Her red coat was smudged with dirt, and she clutched a ragged teddy bear tightly to her chest. Ryan approached cautiously, his footsteps crunching on the frosty ground. "Hey," he called softly, careful not to startle her. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, her tear-streaked face pale and blotchy. She sniffled, gripping her teddy bear tighter. I'm lost," she stammered, her voice breaking. Ryan crouched a few feet away, lowering himself to her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his tone gentle. "Emily," she whispered, her big, round eyes filled with fear. "Hi, Emily," Ryan said, offering her a faint smile. "I'm Ryan. What happened? How did you get lost?" Emily wiped her nose with her sleeve, her breath hitching as she tried to explain. I was playing in the backyard," she said. "Mama and Daddy were making Thanksgiving dinner. I climbed the fence, but then I couldn't find my way back." Ryan's chest tightened at her words. She had wandered from her home, unaware of how dangerous the world could be. He glanced around, half expecting frantic parents to appear, but the park was empty. "Do you know where you live?" he asked. "What street?" Emily shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know. I just want to go home." Ryan's first instinct was to take her to the police, but his gut twisted at the thought. He wasn't exactly in a position to answer questions about himself. The last thing he needed was for anyone to start digging into his life. Still, he couldn't just leave her here. "Okay," he said finally, his voice steady. "It's gonna be all right. We'll figure this out." Emily looked at him uncertainly, her grip on the teddy bear unrelenting. Ryan shifted, uncomfortable under her gaze. He wasn't used to people relying on him for anything, let alone a child. Yet something about her vulnerability stirred something deep within him, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Compassion. He reached out a hand to her, palm up. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of the cold. I know a place nearby where we can sit for a while." Emily hesitated, her small fingers clutching the teddy bear so tightly that Ryan wondered if it might burst at the seams. But then she reached out, her tiny hand slipping into his. The gesture was small, but it felt monumental. Ryan led her out of the park, the city stretching before them. The streets that usually felt indifferent now seemed charged with purpose. He didn't know what he was going to do next or how he'd manage to help her, but one thing was clear. For the first time in a long while, he had someone depending on him. Ryan held tightly to Emily's small hand as they emerged from the park and into the bustling streets of Chicago. The morning sun had climbed higher, cutting through the icy air but doing little to soften the chill. Emily walked beside him, her head bowed and her grip on her teddy bear unyielding. Her tears had dried, but her sniffles betrayed the fear still simmering inside her. Ryan's mind raced as they passed rows of storefronts and cafes. Taking her to the police seemed like the obvious choice, but the thought made his stomach churn. He had no ID, no story, and no reason to trust the authorities. One wrong question, one scrutinizing look, and he could end up in more trouble than he could handle. For a moment, he glanced down at Emily. Her big eyes darted around nervously, scanning the unfamiliar surroundings. She trusted him now, even if she didn't fully understand what that trust meant. He didn't want to break it. The sweet scent of cinnamon and chocolate drifted from a cafe across the street, its glass windows fogged from the warmth inside. Ryan made a quick decision. "Come on," he said, steering Emily toward the entrance. "Let's take a break." The cafe was cozy, filled with the hum of quiet conversation and the clatter of coffee cups. A small bell jingled as they stepped inside, and the warmth hit them like a comforting blanket. Ryan led Emily to a corner booth near the window, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of trouble. Most of the patrons were engrossed in their laptops or books, oblivious to the pair. "Wait here," he told her, sliding into the booth. "I'll be right back." Emily nodded, hugging her teddy bear tightly. Her legs swung beneath the table, not quite reaching the floor. Ryan approached the counter, fishing into his pocket for the few coins he had left. It wasn't much, barely enough for one cup of something small. The barista, a kind-faced woman with auburn hair, greeted him with a polite smile. "Hot chocolate," Ryan said, sliding the coins across the counter. The woman glanced at him, then at Emily sitting alone at the booth. "You want whipped cream with that?" Ryan hesitated, wondering if he could afford the extra cost, but the woman waved him off. "On the house," she said with a wink, disappearing behind the counter to prepare the drink. When Ryan returned to the booth, Emily's eyes lit up at the sight of the steaming mug in his hands. "For you," he said, sliding it toward her. Her hands wrapped around the cup, and for the first time, a small smile broke through her fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Ryan sat across from her, watching as she took her first cautious sip. The whipped cream left a white mustache on her upper lip, and she giggled softly, wiping it away with her sleeve. As she drank, the tension in her shoulders seemed to ease. She looked at Ryan with wide, curious eyes. "Are you like a superhero?" Ryan blinked, taken aback by the question. "A superhero?" he repeated, his lips twitching into a faint smirk. Emily nodded earnestly. "You found me, and you're helping me. That's what superheroes do." Ryan leaned back, his smirk fading as her words sank in. He didn't feel like a superhero. He felt like a fraud, a lost kid barely holding his own life together. But Emily didn't see that. She saw him as someone who had stepped up when she needed it most. "What about you?" Ryan asked, steering the conversation away from himself. "Tell me about your family. What's Thanksgiving like at your house?" Emily's face lit up, her fears momentarily forgotten. She launched into a vivid description of her family's traditions. The giant turkey her mom cooked, the cranberry sauce her dad always burned, and the parade of desserts that covered their kitchen table. Her excitement was infectious, and for a moment, Ryan let himself be drawn into her world, a world filled with love and warmth. But as Emily talked, Ryan felt a pang of guilt. Her parents were likely frantic, searching for her, and he was stalling. The thought weighed heavily on him as she finished her story, her smile fading into a yawn. Ryan glanced at the clock on the cafe wall. Time was slipping away, and he needed to make a decision. He couldn't keep her here forever. "Emily," he said gently, leaning forward, "we need to figure out how to get you home." Her smile faded, and the fear returned to her eyes. "What if I can't find it?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You will," Ryan promised, though he wasn't sure how. "We'll figure it out together." Emily nodded, her trust in him unwavering. As she rested her head on the table, her exhaustion taking over, Ryan knew he was running out of time. He had to find a way to reunite her with her family without drawing too much attention to himself. For now, though, he let her sleep, the half-empty mug of hot chocolate still warm between her hands. The cafe had grown quieter as the morning stretched into afternoon. Emily was fast asleep in the booth, her head resting on the table and her tiny fingers still clutching her teddy bear. Ryan watched her for a moment, ensuring she was comfortable. The faint smile on her face made it clear she felt safe, even if only for now. Ryan leaned back in his seat, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. His thoughts drifted, unbidden, to his own childhood, a time when Thanksgiving wasn't just another cold day to endure. He could still remember the smell of his mother's pecan pie wafting through their small but cozy home. His dad would sneak a slice before dinner, claiming he was testing the quality, while his mom playfully scolded him. The warmth of their laughter, the sight of the dining table crammed with food, and the soft glow of candles. It was all etched into his memory like a photograph. But the image was incomplete, fractured. The fire had stolen more than just their home. It had erased the sense of security he had taken for granted. That last Thanksgiving had been perfect, yet it had slipped into the abyss of what once was. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head to dispel the memories. This wasn't the time to wallow in his losses. Emily's trust weighed on him now. She didn't need to see his pain. She needed him to be steady, to make decisions, to find solutions. Yet the memories refused to fade. His mother's voice echoed in his mind, a faint whisper of love and encouragement. Even in the darkest moments. Ryan, you have to find a way to keep going. He glanced at Emily again, her chest rising and falling rhythmically as she slept. Her innocence, her belief that he could fix everything, reminded him of what he had lost but also stirred something he thought he'd buried. Hope. Maybe protecting her, helping her find her family, could bring some semblance of purpose to his otherwise aimless life. The barista's voice pulled him back to the present. Hey kid, want a refill? Ryan turned to see her standing near their table, holding the coffee pot. She nodded toward Emily, her expression softening. She okay? Yeah, Ryan replied quietly. She's just tired. The barista hesitated, then placed a small plate of cookies on the table. For her, she said, winking. On the house. Ryan nodded his thanks, his throat tight. The small gestures, the bag of peanuts, the hot chocolate, the cookies, each chipped away at the walls he'd built around himself. They reminded him that kindness still existed, even in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. As the barista walked away, Ryan reached for the plate and placed it closer to Emily. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. He allowed himself a small smile, thinking of how excited she'd be to find the cookies when she woke up. For now, though, he let her sleep. He stared out the window, watching the city buzz with life. Families hurried by with shopping bags and bundled-up kids, their laughter muffled by the glass. The world moved on, oblivious to the weight Ryan carried in his chest. He turned back to Emily, the corners of his mouth twitching into a faint smile. For her, he would keep going. For her, he would find the strength to be the person she believed he was. The sun had climbed high into the sky by the time Emily woke, blinking sleepily as she rubbed her eyes. She sat up slowly, clutching her teddy bear. Her gaze fell on the plate of cookies, and a small, delighted smile spread across her face. Did you get these? She asked Ryan, her voice still groggy. Ryan nodded. The lady at the counter left them for you. Emily picked up a cookie and nibbled on it. They're good, she said between bites. Thank you. Ryan gave her a faint smile but said nothing. He had been planning their next move while she slept, and the time to act was now. The city wouldn't stay patient forever, and neither would Emily's family. Emily, he said gently, leaning forward, we need to try and find your home. Do you remember anything? Your address? What your house looks like? Maybe a street name? Emily frowned in concentration, her small face scrunching up as she tried to recall details. There's a big tree in the front yard, she said slowly. And a red door. Ryan nodded, encouraging her. Anything else? Do you remember what's nearby? A park? A school? She shook her head, her expression clouding with frustration. I don't know, she said, her voice rising. I just want my mommy and daddy. Ryan held up his hands to calm her. Hey, it's okay. We'll figure it out. He paused, trying to choose his next words carefully. I think I might know where to start. Emily sniffled but nodded, placing her trust in him once again. Ryan stood and offered her his hand. "Come on." As they stepped out into the brisk afternoon air, Ryan led Emily back toward the park where they had met. It was the only clue he had. Perhaps her family was still searching there, or maybe someone had left a sign. A clue. The city stretched endlessly around them, its towering buildings and winding streets both a comfort and a labyrinth. When they reached the park, Ryan's heart sank. The space was emptier than it had been earlier, the cold weather keeping most people indoors. Still, he scanned every corner, looking for anything that might help. Then he saw it. A bright piece of paper taped to a lamppost near the entrance. As they approached, Ryan's stomach tightened. It was a missing child poster. The words, "Have you seen Emily?" printed in bold letters above a picture of the little girl holding the same teddy bear she now clutched tightly. Below, a phone number was scrawled in black marker. "That's you," Ryan said softly, kneeling to show Emily the poster. Emily's eyes widened as she stared at the picture of herself. "Mommy put that there," she said, her voice a mix of hope and desperation. Ryan straightened, his mind racing. He had a way to contact her parents now, but it wasn't that simple. The phone number on the poster was both a lifeline and a risk. Calling it could bring Emily back to her family, but it could also bring attention to him, attention he couldn't afford. Emily tugged at his sleeve. "Can we call them now? Please?" Ryan looked at her, his chest tightening. He had never seen someone so small carry so much hope in their eyes. She deserved to go home, no matter what it cost him. He nodded. "Yeah, let's find a phone." A payphone stood a few blocks away, its chipped paint and grime-covered buttons a testament to its age. Ryan pulled a handful of coins from his pocket, hoping he had enough. As he dialed the number from the poster, Emily stood beside him, her hand clutching his tightly. The phone rang once, twice, and then a woman's voice answered. "Hello," she said, her tone frantic. "Who is this? Do you know where Emily is?" Ryan hesitated, his throat tightening. He glanced down at Emily, who was staring up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. "I found her," Ryan said finally. "She's safe." The phone line went silent for a moment before the woman on the other end gasped. You have Emily?" Her voice trembled with a mix of hope and fear. "Is she okay? Where is she? Please, let me speak to her." Ryan tightened his grip on the payphone receiver, his mind racing. The relief in her voice was palpable, and for a moment, he felt the weight of her worry. But he couldn't let his guard down just yet. He looked down at Emily, who was clutching his hand, her teddy bear pressed tightly to her chest. "She's fine," Ryan said, his voice measured. "She's with me now. I found her in Grant Park. She's safe." The woman on the line let out a sob of relief, her voice thick with emotion. "Oh, thank God. Thank you. Thank you so much." She took a deep, shaky breath. "I'm Sarah, her mother. Please, where can I meet you? I need to see her." Ryan hesitated. Meeting Emily's family would mean exposing himself, putting his own fragile anonymity at risk. But looking at Emily, her hopeful eyes fixed on the phone, he knew there was no other option. "There's a square a few blocks from the park," Ryan said finally. "By the fountain. Meet us there in an hour." "Yes, of course." Sarah's voice cracked with urgency. "I'll be there. Please, don't let her out of your sight." Ryan hung up without responding, his heart pounding. He turned to Emily and knelt to her level. "We're going to meet your mom soon," he said. Emily's face lit up with joy, tears welling in her eyes. "Really? Really?" Ryan assured her, brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "She's on her way." Emily hugged her teddy bear tightly, her excitement bubbling over. Ryan stood, glancing around to make sure no one was paying them too much attention. The payphone stood on the edge of a busy street, and he felt exposed. "Let's go wait somewhere quieter," he said, taking Emily's hand. They walked to the square, the fountain at its center a familiar landmark for Ryan. It was a place where people often passed without stopping, blending into the rhythm of the city. They found a bench near the fountain, and Ryan sat, his eyes scanning the area. Emily sat beside him, her legs swinging as she clutched her teddy bear. "Do you think Mommy will be mad at me?" she asked suddenly, her voice small. Ryan turned to her, surprised by the question. Mad? Why would she be mad? Because I wandered off, Emily said, her eyes downcast. I wasn't supposed to leave the yard. Ryan shook his head. Your mom's not mad, Emily. She's just worried. She loves you, and she's going to be so happy to see you. Emily looked up at him, her expression softening. You're really nice, she said. Are you a dad? The question caught Ryan off guard, and for a moment he didn't know how to respond. No, he said finally. I'm not. Emily tilted her head, studying him. Then why are you helping me? Ryan hesitated, his gaze drifting to the fountain. Because someone needs to, he said simply. Before Emily could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps caught their attention. Ryan turned to see a woman running toward them, her hair disheveled and her face flushed with worry. Behind her, a man followed, his strides longer but just as frantic. Mommy! Emily cried, jumping off the bench. The woman, Sarah, dropped to her knees, catching Emily in a tight embrace. She sobbed openly, holding her daughter as if she might vanish again. The man, presumably Emily's father, reached them moments later, his hands shaking as he placed them gently on Emily's shoulders. Ryan stood back, his hands stuffed into his pockets as he watched the reunion. He felt a strange mix of relief and discomfort. This was their moment, not his. Sarah looked up, her tear-streaked face breaking into a smile. You're the one who found her, she said, her voice trembling. Thank you. I don't know how to thank you. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, glancing away. It's nothing, he mumbled. But Emily wasn't done. She pulled away from her mother just long enough to grab Ryan's hand. Mommy, this is Ryan, she said proudly. He's my superhero. Ryan froze, unsure how to respond. Sarah's eyes softened, her gratitude evident. Ryan, she said, standing. You have no idea what you've done for us. Please, let us do something to thank you. Ryan shook his head, already stepping back. I'm just glad she's okay. But as he turned to leave, Emily's tiny hand tugged on his. Wait, don't go, she pleaded, her eyes wide with worry. For the first time in years, Ryan felt truly seen. But he couldn't let himself get attached. Not now. Not when walking away was the only way to protect himself. Ryan froze for a moment, Emily's small hand clutching his like a lifeline. Her wide, tearful eyes stared up at him, silently begging him not to go. Behind her, Sarah and the man he assumed was her husband exchanged a glance, both of them unsure of how to proceed. Ryan, please, Sarah said softly, stepping closer. We owe you so much. You stayed with her, kept her safe, and brought her back to us. Let us thank you properly. I'm just glad she's okay, Ryan muttered, trying to pull his hand free from Emily's grip. But she wouldn't let go. You can come with us, Emily said, her voice trembling. Come to our house. We're having Thanksgiving dinner. Mommy makes the best turkey. Ryan hesitated, his chest tightening. He hadn't sat at a family table in years. The thought of stepping into their home, of being surrounded by warmth and light, felt almost suffocating. He didn't belong in that world anymore. Emily, he began, his voice soft but firm. You're with your family now. That's what matters. But Emily shook her head. You're my friend, she said, her grip tightening. You saved me. You should come too. Sarah knelt beside Emily, her hand resting gently on her daughter's shoulder. She's right, she said, looking up at Ryan. You don't have to leave. You can come with us, just for a meal. Please. Ryan glanced at the father, who hadn't spoken yet but was watching him intently. The man nodded, his expression serious but kind. You're welcome in our home, he said. Anyone who looks out for Emily is family to us. The word family hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He wanted to say no, to walk away before he got too close. But Emily's pleading eyes rooted him in place. She trusted him. Maybe, for just one night, he could trust them too. Okay, Ryan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily's face lit up with a radiant smile, and she hugged his arm tightly. Yay! You'll love it, she said, bouncing on her toes. Sarah stood, a relieved smile on her face. "Thank you," she said softly. "Let's go home." The ride to their house was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Emily chattered in the back seat, describing everything from her favorite stuffed animals to the special dessert her mother always made for Thanksgiving. Ryan sat beside her, listening but not saying much. He couldn't remember the last time he had been in a car that wasn't a bus or a train. When they arrived, the house was exactly as Emily had described. A modest but charming home with a big tree in the yard and a red front door. The smell of roasted turkey and fresh-baked rolls hit Ryan the moment Sarah opened the door, the warmth of the house spilling out into the cold. Come in, Sarah urged, gesturing for Ryan to step inside. He hesitated at the threshold, suddenly feeling out of place. But Emily grabbed his hand and tugged him forward. Inside, the house was alive with the sights and sounds of Thanksgiving. The table was set with a mismatched but homey collection of plates and glasses, and the kitchen was a flurry of activity. A half-carved turkey sat on the counter beside bowls of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce. Ryan stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of what to do with himself. But Sarah guided him to the dining room, pulling out a chair for him at the table. "You're our guest tonight," she said with a smile. "Make yourself comfortable." Emily climbed into the chair beside him, beaming as she set her teddy bear on her lap. "This is the best day ever," she declared. Ryan couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm, even as a knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. He hadn't been part of a family dinner in so long that he barely remembered how it worked. But as the meal began, the warmth of the room started to seep into him. Halfway through the meal, Sarah raised her glass, her voice trembling with emotion. "This Thanksgiving, I'm thankful for my family," she said, glancing at Emily and her husband. "And for Ryan, who brought our little girl back to us. You'll always have a place at our table." Ryan felt the room's attention shift to him, and he stared down at his plate, his face flushing. "I didn't do anything special," he mumbled. But Emily leaned over and whispered, "Yes, you did." As the night wore on, Ryan found himself laughing at Emily's stories and savoring the food he hadn't expected to eat. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something he thought he'd lost forever: belonging. When the meal ended, Sarah and her husband pulled him aside. "We'd like to help you," Sarah said gently. "We don't know your story, but if you ever need a place to stay or someone to talk to, you're always welcome here." Ryan nodded, unable to find the words to respond. As he stepped outside later that night, the cold biting at his face, he felt something unfamiliar. Hope. Ryan stood in the doorway, the warmth of the house still clinging to him as the cold night air swept across his face. Emily's giggles echoed faintly from inside as Sarah and her husband cleared the table. For the first time in a long while, Ryan felt full. Not just from the food, though the Thanksgiving feast had been more than he'd had in months, but from something harder to name, something like belonging. As he lingered, unsure of how to say goodbye, Sarah appeared behind him, a dish towel draped over her shoulder. She was holding a plastic container packed with leftovers. "For you," she said with a kind smile, extending the container. "I thought you might need this." Ryan hesitated, the urge to refuse bubbling up instinctively. "I don't." "Take it," Sarah interrupted gently. "We'd be honored if you did." Reluctantly, Ryan took the container, mumbling a soft, "Thank you." He could feel her gaze on him, warm but curious, as if she were trying to figure him out. "You don't have anywhere to go tonight, do you?" she asked suddenly, her voice careful, as though she didn't want to scare him off. Ryan's grip on the container tightened, his shoulders tensing. "I'm fine," he said quickly. "Ryan," she said softly, stepping closer, "you don't have to do this alone. We have a guest room. It's not much, but you're welcome to stay here tonight. No strings attached." Her offer hung in the air, heavy with implications. Ryan's first instinct was to refuse. He wasn't used to this kind of kindness. It made him feel exposed, vulnerable. But when he glanced back inside, he saw Emily sitting at the table, her teddy bear in her lap, chatting happily with her dad. The thought of walking back out into the cold, leaving this little pocket of warmth and safety, made his chest ache. "I don't want to be a burden," Ryan said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're not," Sarah assured him. "Far from it." Before Ryan could answer, Emily spotted him at the door and ran over, her face lighting up. "Are you staying?" she asked, her voice filled with hope. Ryan looked down at her, her excitement and innocence cutting through his defenses. Slowly, he nodded. "Just for tonight." The guest room was small but cozy, with soft blankets folded neatly at the foot of the bed. Ryan stood awkwardly by the door, unsure of how to settle into the space. The house was quiet now, the chaos of dinner replaced by the peaceful hum of a family winding down for the night. As he sat on the edge of the bed, Ryan's thoughts wandered. He hadn't slept in a real bed in years. The last one had been his, in a home he had long since lost. His fingers brushed the soft quilt, and a wave of emotion threatened to pull him under. This place, this family, it wasn't his, but for a fleeting moment, it felt like it could be. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. "Ryan?" It was Sarah. "Come in," he said, clearing his throat. She stepped inside, holding a steaming mug of tea. "I thought this might help you sleep," she said, placing it on the bedside table. "Thanks," Ryan murmured, staring down at his hands. Sarah hesitated, then sat in the chair by the desk. "You don't have to tell me anything you don't want to," she began carefully. "But if you ever need someone to listen, we're here." Ryan looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes making it impossible to brush off her kindness. "I haven't had a family in a long time," he admitted quietly, surprising even himself with the confession. "It's just been me." Sarah's face softened, but she didn't press him. "Well," she said after a moment, "you're part of ours now, as long as you want to be." She stood, giving him a gentle smile before leaving the room. Ryan sat in silence for a long time after that, the mug of tea warming his hands. For the first time in years, the ache of loneliness felt a little less sharp. As he lay down that night, staring at the ceiling, he let the weight of the day settle over him. He had found Emily, brought her home, and somehow ended up with a place to rest his head. Maybe, just maybe, this Thanksgiving really was the beginning of something new. The morning light streamed through the curtains, warming Ryan's face and pulling him gently from sleep. For a moment, he lay still, the unfamiliar comfort of a soft mattress disorienting. It took a few seconds to remember where he was. In a real home, surrounded by people who had opened their door to him. He sat up slowly, his body still stiff from years of sleeping on benches and cold ground. The room was quiet, but the faint sound of voices and the clatter of dishes drifted up from downstairs. Hesitantly, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, stretching before heading for the door. Downstairs, the house was already alive with the sounds of family. Emily was at the kitchen table, her teddy bear sitting beside her as she scribbled on a piece of paper. Sarah was at the stove, humming softly as she flipped pancakes, while her husband, Tom, sipped coffee and scanned the morning paper. Emily looked up first, her face breaking into a wide grin. "Ryan!" she exclaimed, hopping down from her chair and running over to him. "Hey," Ryan said, caught off guard by her enthusiasm. She grabbed his hand and tugged him toward the table. "You can sit here," she said, pointing to the chair beside hers. "Mommy's making pancakes. They're the best." Ryan glanced at Sarah, who turned from the stove and gave him a warm smile. "Good morning," she said. "I hope you're hungry." "Yeah," Ryan said softly, taking the seat Emily offered. The warmth of the family's routine surrounded him, both comforting and foreign. As they ate, Tom set his mug down and looked at Ryan. "So," he said, his tone casual but curious, "what's your plan from here?" Ryan froze, the question hitting him harder than he expected. He didn't have a plan, not really. He never had. Survival was the only thing that had mattered, and even that had been a day-to-day struggle. I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom nodded thoughtfully. "That's okay," he said. "Sometimes, you just need a little time to figure things out." Sarah joined the conversation, her expression gentle. "Ryan, I don't know your story, and you don't have to tell us if you're not ready. But you don't have to face this alone. We can help." Ryan looked between them, his chest tightening. "Why?" he asked quietly. "Why are you being so kind to me?" Emily piped up before either of her parents could answer. "Because you're my hero," she said matter-of-factly, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Sarah smiled and reached across the table, placing a hand over Ryan's. "Because we can," she said. "And because we want to." For a long moment, Ryan didn't know what to say. The walls he had built around himself felt fragile, as though a single kind word could bring them crumbling down. He looked at Emily, her unwavering trust in him shining in her eyes, and then at Sarah and Tom, who regarded him not with pity, but with genuine care. Finally, he spoke. "I've been on my own for a long time," he said, his voice steady but low. "Since I lost my parents. I didn't think I'd ever feel this." He gestured vaguely at the table, at the family around it. "Like I belong somewhere." Tom nodded, his expression serious. "Well, you're welcome here, Ryan. For as long as you need." Sarah leaned forward. "And if you're willing, we'd like to help you find something more permanent. A job? Maybe even a place of your own someday. Whatever you need to get back on your feet." Ryan's chest felt heavy with gratitude, the weight of their kindness pressing against years of isolation. "Thank you," he said, the words barely audible. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," Sarah said gently. "Just promise me one thing." Ryan looked at her, unsure of what she would ask. "Promise me you won't give up on yourself," she said. "Because we won't." Ryan nodded, unable to speak as the lump in his throat grew. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of something he thought he'd lost forever: hope. That afternoon, Tom took Ryan aside while Emily and Sarah decorated the living room for Christmas. Boxes of ornaments and tinsel were strewn across the floor, and the sound of holiday music filled the house. "I was serious about what I said earlier," Tom began. "If you're willing, I know a guy who runs a local shelter. It's not just a place to sleep, they offer job training too. Could be a good step." Ryan hesitated. The idea of stepping into something so structured felt overwhelming, but the alternative, continuing to drift, aimless and alone, felt worse. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "That's all I ask," Tom replied, clapping him on the shoulder. By evening, the house was glowing with the soft light of stringed Christmas lights and the warm scent of Sarah's baking. Ryan helped Emily hang the final ornament on the tree, her giggles infectious as she directed him where to place it. For the first time in as long as he could remember, Ryan felt a part of something, no longer a ghost drifting through the world. Maybe, just maybe, he had found the beginning of a new life. Snow dusted the ground outside the house as twilight settled over the neighborhood. Inside, the home glowed with the warmth of string lights and the gentle hum of holiday music. The Christmas tree, now fully decorated with Emily's help, stood proudly in the corner of the living room, a symbol of newfound joy. Ryan sat on the couch, a plate of cookies balanced on his lap, as Emily excitedly recounted her plans for writing to Santa. Across the room, Sarah and Tom exchanged quiet smiles, their gratitude for the day unspoken but palpable. The entire house felt alive, filled with a peace Ryan hadn't experienced in years. As Emily climbed onto the couch to snuggle beside him, Ryan felt a strange but welcome sense of belonging. For the first time, he wasn't just an outsider looking in. The next morning, Sarah found Ryan in the kitchen, where he was pouring a cup of coffee. She smiled at the sight of him blending so naturally into their routine. "You've been good for Emily," she said, breaking the quiet. "I can't thank you enough for what you did." Ryan nodded, still unsure how to accept their endless gratitude. "She's a good kid," he said simply. Sarah stepped closer, her voice soft. "We meant what we said last night. You're part of our family now, as much as you want to be." Ryan looked down at the mug in his hands. He'd spent so long running from connection, fearing rejection, that the idea of staying felt both terrifying and tempting. "I'm not used to this," he admitted. "Having people care." "Well, get used to it," Sarah said with a smile. "Because we do." Later that afternoon, as snow began to fall more steadily, Tom called Ryan into the living room. Sarah sat beside him, a folded piece of paper in her hands and a gentle but serious expression on her face. "Ryan," Tom began, "we've been talking, and we want to offer you something more than just a place to stay." Ryan froze, unsure of what was coming next. "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. Sarah unfolded the paper and handed it to him. It was a preliminary application to start the process of legal guardianship, or possibly adoption. Ryan's breath caught as he scanned the words. "We know this might seem sudden," Sarah said, her voice steady but warm, "and we'd never want to pressure you into something you're not ready for. But if you want it, we'd like to make this official. To give you a home for real." Ryan stared at the paper, his mind reeling. For so long, he'd been invisible, forgotten. And now, here was a family not only offering him a place to stay but a place to belong. Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice cracking. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but her smile remained steady. "Because we see you, Ryan. We see the good in you. And because everyone deserves a family." Emily, who had been quietly listening from the corner of the room, ran to Ryan and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You're my superhero," she said, looking up at him. "Please stay." For the first time in years, Ryan allowed himself to hope. Not just for a warm bed or a hot meal, but for a future where he wasn't alone. Slowly, he nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Okay," he whispered. Sarah and Tom smiled, their relief evident, while Emily cheered and hugged him tighter. For Ryan, it wasn't just a Thanksgiving miracle. It was the start of a new life. In the weeks that followed, Ryan began to settle into the rhythm of his new family. He joined Tom on errands, helped Sarah in the kitchen, and spent countless hours with Emily, who declared him her big brother. As Christmas approached, the house became even more festive, and Ryan found himself decorating, baking, and, for the first time in years, laughing. On Christmas morning, Sarah and Tom surprised Ryan with a gift, a key to the house. "You're home now," Tom said simply, his hand on Ryan's shoulder. Ryan stared at the key, his heart full. He had spent so long surviving that he had forgotten what it meant to live. Now, thanks to Emily's unwavering trust, Sarah's kindness, and Tom's steady support, he had a chance to rebuild. As they sat down for Christmas dinner, Emily led the family in a prayer of thanks. Ryan listened, his heart swelling with gratitude. This Thanksgiving had brought him more than he ever thought possible. A family, a home, and most importantly, hope.